sort of shied away from talking about sales because there's such a different process from sharing stories that impact people versus using psychological persuasion in your sales process and your marketing. But I finally have given in and I'm like, I'm just going to do a masterclass on this because I know it makes such a difference in the way that we sell. So, I am an award-winning performer, filmmaker. I've built two businesses to six figures and beyond, and I have a double master's degree in film, psychology, and communication. And I help spiritually aligned entrepreneurs elevate their voice, vision, and visibility so that they can amplify their most powerful expression while building a meaningful business and movement. So, whenever people do master classes, they tend to really focus on the what or the why, but not the how. And I don't like to do things that way. I really want you guys to be able to implement some of these things and walk away with knowing exactly how you can turn this into practice. But you are in the right place if you want to move from that place of just being a service provider and step into visionary. If you want to be just an overall stronger communicator and salesperson, and third, you want to leverage the power of stories in your marketing and messaging because you know it works, you know that it's efficient. And there's a common misconception that stories are all about us, but when you actually learn how to leverage stories in general, it really truly is the easiest way to skyrocket your sales because you're essentially selling without that feeling of manipulation or having to convince someone because the story does the job of shifting their beliefs. So, on the agenda today, we're going to be talking about how to sell out your offers by turning every story into a sales activator, the three core beliefs that your messaging must create for someone to buy, the identity shift story framework, which is actually part of my paid program, but I wanted to teach it in real time with you guys. And then I'm going to share a sneak peek of my Parisian apartment journey and what that has taught me about high-end selling and identity sales and storytelling. Oh, and an invitation to join the Story Alchemy Mastermind or Story Codes. And I think, Andrea, you were in the Story Alchemy Mastermind last year, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
so. Yep.
I think it was in 2024. So, why stories? Stories are not just for the sake of centering yourself. There is neuroscience behind why we use stories, how that evokes something within us, but they serve the purpose of creating a bridge and a mirror to validate the core message that you're sharing. So, stories are not only a form of communication proven to activate multiple parts of the brain, but neuro mirroring is when you tell a story. Even if you think in your day-to-day life, if you're telling someone a story, their brain is naturally searching for a point of commonality, which is why you'll probably notice often you'll tell a story and someone will be like, oh my gosh, me too. And then they'll tell a similar story. And it's not because they're not listening to you or cutting you off. This is just the most natural way for our brain to understand experiences in life. And so in marketing, the more we can tell stories and what's the word, spell it out for our audience, the less thinking that they have to do. And I think in this day and age when we're scrolling on social media so often, at least I'll see posts and it's like you're making your potential client think so hard that they're not going to think and they're going to scroll on by. And so the more explicit and detailed and specific you can be in the story and painting a picture, the easier your sales are going to be. So people will always forget facts, details, features, benefits, all of that, but they'll remember how a story made them feel. Stories shift beliefs because it paints a picture of the inner journey and the transformation. Simple as that. So imagine you tell Susie, who is struggling with her money mindset, to just believe in the abundance of the universe. Just believe. She'd probably roll her eyes because she doesn't believe that. She needs proof. Now imagine if you told a story about how either you or a client was living in scarcity and how you found abundance through activating your spiritual gifts. When you tell that story in detail, it's going to start lighting off little neural mirrors in her brain that open up either her perspective different aspects, different beliefs, different energetics, not just in her heart, but also in her brain. And that truly is the power of selling with stories, because it does the work of overcoming objections, as we say. When you tell the stories as proof of what you're teaching or selling, you literally naturally overcome those objections, which is natural. We all have objections. We're going to talk about those beliefs later. So, I want to do a little audit, self audit. When you're selling, ask yourself, who does my buyer become? Who do they become when they buy my thing? And what do they start believing about themselves? And if you can look at your marketing and messaging, it's, do you have any stories that reinforce this identity? So I'm going to share examples. So who does the buyer become? I kind of put this in three different industries: business, health, business, health, and relationships. But so for example, the overworked hustler, when they buy your offer, they become calm, grounded, and trusted. The health provider, when their person comes to them and they're like self-critical of their body, who they become when they invest is someone who is in tune with body wisdom. Like that's their transformation. That's what they're selling. In relationships, someone who is always a people pleaser and afraid to speak up with their partner, who they become is a secure communicator. So we really want to be making sure in our marketing and messaging that we are focusing on obviously the end result of what they want, but also who do they become? Because their biggest resistance is actually going to be them. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, someone's biggest resistance is going to be their own self-image. It's going to be their own fear of actually who do they become when they get what they want and they get to become who they want to be. So, what do they start believing about themselves? So, in order, so the business example, I'm capable of growth without chaos. That's that shift that that type of person would need to shift, and your marketing would have to address that. The health and wellness, I don't need punishment to create change. I can listen to my body. And for the relationship coach, the belief that they would need to shift in their messaging is that their needs matter, and conflict doesn't mean abandonment. Because that's, is anyone who is in a people pleaser, they are afraid that confrontation means abandonment, right? So we want to be telling stories that reinforce the identity shift and help guide them through that journey. Because again, those are going to be, but people don't know that their biggest resistance is actually change. So that's why if you hop on a discovery call or you have these sales conversations, people can sometimes have a whole whack of reasons. They often use money as a scapegoat. Money is never like, not, I don't want to say never, never, but for the most part, it's never really the objection. And again, we're going to lead to the beliefs. I think it's the next slide. Nope, not yet. So if you aren't making a clear identity transformation from this to that, then you are missing the most important subconscious and psychological sales activator. So little self-audit, if you look at your most recent posts, what transformation were you selling? And did you speak to the identity and the subconscious state of mind? Feel free to chime in if you want to, if anything comes up for you.
I shared a post just yesterday, and I like the question, what transformation were you selling? It makes me reflect. I have to go back and find the post. I'm not sure it was a transformation that I was selling, but it was more about a relational story of
Mm,
allowing myself to be vulnerable, to show that I am on the same journey that a lot of the women that I work with are on as well. So trying to be relational in that way, as
mhm.
opposed to just telling them about stuff. I was trying to tell the story of my journey in a
Yeah,
way that was relatable to them.
yeah. And I think you can even take it a step further because a lot of the times, again, this is just putting yourself into the psychology of, I'm going to say the term buyer. That sounds so
Mhm.
soulless, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like the client or customer, it's like their limiting belief to that will be like, well, that's possible for you, but not for me. So you
Mhm.
can take it a step further in your content and actually address like because they need to find proof of evidence in their own experience. Because that's going to be their little like, and I've even felt that and heard that before. Yeah, well, that's possible for you because da 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 da. And so, especially for those of us who work in the transformational space, it's so much of it comes down to our own self-belief. So hold on to that because we're going to move into some prompts. But the subconscious sales activators. So at the highest level, storytelling is not about persuasion, it's not about manipulation. It really is about creating resonance. People don't buy when they're feel like when they feel like they're trying to be convinced. They buy because there's something inside them that recognizes themselves in your story. And that's actually what opens like that proof of possibility. There are the core subconscious activators that create that recognition. So I apologize, the font is like really, really small here. So the first thing is identity elevation. So that's a very fancy word to just say it's the identity shift. They go from this to that. So humans naturally, like we're on this journey of self-actualization, of evolution. We're always becoming something and someone new every day. And your story simply answers that question of who do I become when I choose this? Who do I become when I choose to invest in this offer, person, whatever, product, whatever it might be, right? And so it could be, you know, the woman who no longer overworks, the business owner who trusts her decisions, the leader who moves with quiet certainty. When your message speaks to who they're becoming, the sales feel like alignment and not pressure. And we are going to talk about methodology and your process and who you help and how, but that core identity shift is so important because as I've said many times, that's going to be their number one internal objection, but they don't know that it's their objection. That's why it's our job to create the content and the messaging, the marketing that spells that out for them. Because no one's going to admit that they don't actually want to change. So the second thing is the neural mirrors. And this is something with storytelling that, especially when I ran story codes in the fall, it's you have to really master that skill of flipping the mirror back to it's not just telling your story, but it's why it matters to them. Like, really, really connect the dots because this is where it not just like creates that trust, but really getting into their mind of like, what are their actual secret doubts? What are their unspoken desires? Like, what are the things that they are not actually voicing, but that you know your client so well that you can share stories that are gonna, again, like create that sense of trust. It's that moment of they understand me. And this is when defensiveness dissolves, safety appears, and connection begins. The third thing of the subconscious sales activators is tangibility. Again, I cannot stress this enough. I see so much vague messaging like live your best life. That does not mean anything. The number of times I've seen these I help statements like I help people uncover their limiting beliefs so they can live their best life ever. That might have worked 15 years ago. That does not work today. There are too many talented people out there that are so freaking good at what they do and their marketing that we've got to learn how to be more specific, but also in the sense of really anchoring in like sensory anchoring. So it's using descriptions that takes it from like concept to embodied. So the example would be like the one I gave here. My business became easier. Like that's a concept. Like if that's your business promise as an example, it's like, no, for the first time, I closed my laptop at 3 p.m. without guilt and sat on my floor and drank some tea. Like one of them is informational, and the second one is that subconscious proof. It's tangible, it's visual, it evokes an example, and so someone can really see themselves in that transformation story or end result, whatever it is that you're selling. So to recap, the identity shift from this to that, the neural mirrors of flipping it back to why it matters to them, how it applies in their life, and like literally spell it out. If you're sharing a personal story, don't just make it about you, link it back to why that matters to your ideal client. And the third one is the tangibility. The more you can speak in specifics and use like colorful language and sensory, like smell, touch, visual, the more you're going to paint the picture for your potential client or audience. So, how to sell out your offers using story selling experiences. Obviously, there's so many different types of content, and we're not going to dive into every one of them today. But specifically for story selling, there's embodiment stories, identity shift stories, client transformation stories, and belief perspective shifting stories. We are going to dive into detail for one of these, but I just wanted to kind of give you a sense, like I'm sure just from reading the words, you guys know like what a client transformation story is or embodiment stories. So without further ado, I feel like I'm making good time because normally I am such a talker. The 3 beliefs that your messaging must reinforce to sell your offers. So the first one is you. Are you the right person to help them? Do you have the lived experience and embodiment? The second one is the solution. Do they believe in the solution? Do they believe it can really work for them? So does your signature method match their needs? What is your unique way of doing things? And how does your process fill the gaps of maybe things they've already previously tried? And then the last one is they actually have to believe in themselves. So what is their own internal belief system? What is their self-image or their paradigm? What is their level of risk adverse in life, risk adverse decision making? And what is their level of self-trust? So these 3 beliefs, this is the part of a masterclass where you could be like, great, Brittany, I intellectually get what you're saying, but how do I actually turn these into story prompts? So I actually have specific prompts for you. And what I want to say is that this is something like a lot of times people will come to classes and they'll passively listen, but then they don't go and implement. I literally could have charged for this. This is literally what I help my private clients do, is to implement this and put this into practice because it works. Things don't work when we don't actually implement it. And it's something that I really hold my clients accountable to, is the magic happens when you start putting it out there, when you start practicing stories, when you start interacting with people and sharing different stories. You will naturally, when you start addressing these things in your content and you make it an easy process for yourself. So like I have a client right now who is getting really, really stuck in their head on an identity shift story. And I obviously have the tools and strategies to support them through that, because that is a common like roadblock. But it's like the more fun we have creating and marketing, the more fun we're gonna have selling, and the more fun we're gonna have when the sales are coming in. So we really want to make this process like using the least amount of brain power possible, but still actually putting these things into action. And there's no particular, I just want to specify, there's no particular sequence. Like if you're following a certain launch structure, it's like you can just weave these elements into your overall selling. So you want to address, why are you the person? So that's your own personal credibility. That's a standalone post on its own. You want to have different posts that address the solution of whatever it is that you're offering. So that could be the higher vision, that could be a direct solution, that could be the transformation, doesn't matter what industry you're in. And then the third one, and this is the one I don't see people doing enough, is it's the client's self-belief. So we can really position ourselves at the sales forefront when we address these different beliefs, not all at once, but separately throughout all of our messaging. And again, when you're using stories, people will remember the stories. They won't remember facts. People don't remember facts. They remember how a story made them feel. They remember how a story shifted a belief. Oh, I remember that client testimonial journey and it was possible for her. Maybe it's possible for me. Or they hear an embodiment story and they feel really connected to work with that particular person. So without further ado, because we like tangibles, here are 3 content prompts. And actually, as I was going through this, I came up with so many more ideas that I think I'm going to create a little PDF for you guys after and list them out and have like, I don't know, 5 to 10 prompts per category. So the first one around you, this is the identity shift, and this is part of today that we're going to go through in massive detail. So I'm not going to share that prompt right now. For the solution, so here's a prompt. The issue isn't insert what they think the problem is. The issue is that insert real problem. My offer fills the gap by insert. And I wrote an example here that does that make sense? I know prompts either people love prompts or prompts like shut people's brains down. What was my example for this? Okay, so as a holistic business coach, it's not that you don't know how to make money, it's that you don't know how to feel good in the process. My offer fills the gap by bridging nervous system regulation with practical financial guidance, as an example, right? What people think their problem is isn't actually what their problem is. And it's our job to kind of shine the light on that and then let the solution be the path. Another prompt could be tell a story of a client who tried a lot of things before you, and then what finally clicked once they used your approach. So far, so good. Then the them prompt, so the belief they have to have in themselves. So it isn't that you insert what they think is wrong with them. It's that you've been living inside, insert the limiting story. So this is where people can potentially get defensive because no one likes to be told what their limiting beliefs are. So we want to be strategic and help share a story that will create the subconscious shift for them. The like subconscious, I get it. So a story, you could share a story of either yourself or this could be a client transformation story of a belief shift of like, I believed this. And once I believed this, everything cracked, everything clicked. Does that make sense? I feel like Julie, you're like, ask me the questions.
I'm percolating and processing.
I can give an example in
Yeah,
your
if you wouldn't
context.
mind.
Yeah, I think that'll be easier. Okay, tell me what you offer. You work in like human design, right? Have I seen that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a transformational life coach.
Okay.
Uh, so I work with high achieving women who, by all society standards, have checked the boxes of doing everything right, but
Mhm.
inside they still feel disconnected
Yeah.
and like they're not living authentic lives.
Yeah. So here would be a really good example of like they're not living authentic lives. That would be
Hmm.
one of those, I know you're just sharing this with me, but
Yeah.
that would be one of those examples of like that's if we go back to the tangibles, or was it right here? Um, what is that authentic life to them?
Hmm.
And obviously different clients are going to have different definitions of authenticity. So
Yeah.
different posts and different pieces of content and marketing can speak to those different levels of authenticity. Because someone who maybe has been living like a perfectionist life and they might have a different definition of like how do I want to lean into how do I want to feel in success? That could look so differently for different people. And I think that if we want to build trust, it's like we want to understand the person that we're hiring understands where we want to go. And if we don't tell them that, then they're not going to guess.
Yeah.
And oftentimes half the time they don't even know how to articulate Like so often we don't even know how to just articulate what our vision is. And
Yes.
so we get to be like that guide and that leader and share it for them. Like I think of that context in my own example, and I Andrea knows this. I'm in the middle of buying a Paris apartment, and my schedule is so hectic right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I running this masterclass when I'm so busy? And I was like, no, I've already committed, so I'm going to do it. And then I was like, I'm not going to stress myself out I'm very like goal driven. And I was like, I'm not going to put myself in a level of stress to get more signups. I'm just going to trust that whoever is here and it's perfect. And that is such a shift for me from the way that I grew up, the things that I taught, that gives me that level of like, and like that's what I want to teach women. Because I could have driven myself crazy to get more and more signups, but like for what? And so it's like the feeling, right? Even me
Mhm.
just sharing this story, like, is a way that illustrates that identity shift. I just naturally, I naturally do this. Not to, toot my own horn, but does that make sense? Is that like a good example?
Yes.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
When you talked about, living your best life, I find the authentic life thing very vague. I wouldn't know what that meant at all. I
Hmm.
find that whole authentic life thing, again, it's just so vague to me. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm working with a coach right now to up level and transform my life. But I just that authentic thing,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean, sort of doesn't mean anything to me. So just an observation when you talked about that vague
Yeah.
thing. That sort of also feels that vague thing
Yeah. But I mean, for you,
because
Andrea, like
like
from knowing
that to
me,
me, it just doesn't. What does authentic mean? It doesn't mean. Does it mean? It just doesn't. It's sort of one of those vague things, doesn't it? It means a lot of things to
Well,
different
that's one of
people.
the things you get to decide for yourself what authentic for you looks like. What is
yeah.
the real
Right, but if
Andrea?
I don't even have a remote thing, I wouldn't even know how to come to you and go.
Yeah.
It's just an observation.
Yeah.
Again, it feels vague. Just
Yeah.
just
But
Yeah.
I feel like for you, Andrea, and like knowing you, like I know travel for you is important because you were in Paris. We saw each other in Paris like a month and a half ago. So that might be authentic, like traveling and discovering culture. And because you come to Paris, like you come to Europe once or twice a year. So that is you authentically living, your life. So Julie, if say where you were creating a piece of content on that, you could
Mhm.
speak to like, yeah, traveling, immersing yourself in culture is a part of your authentic life. So you could just define, that's not everyone's definition though, but that's
Right.
okay, So but this
yeah.
is really good, I would say market research for you, Julie. As I was saying, a lot of people don't even know what authenticity means to them because they're living in so much conditioning. And again, it's that belief of who do I get to be when who am I at my most abundant wealthy self? And
Mhm.
that brings up like all of the self-image and paradigm stuff.
Yeah.
So the money is in the implementation. I can leave. I actually wrote this post. It was a bit spicy a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I can leave you a 5-minute voice note with very specific story feedback that you'll never apply. Or you can work with me and we can actually implement this together and see fast results because you don't just become a stronger communicator by watching a masterclass or whatever, immersing yourself in some training. You really have to practice, and business is like an experiment. It's just testing, putting things out there. You can't get it wrong. It's just putting messages out there, seeing what lands, seeing what doesn't. I know my posts and stories that get the highest engagement is when I get really real and authentic. And people always tell me how authentic I am, which is, I don't really know how to take that as a compliment because I'm like, what else would I be? But it's just like this constant like feedback that I get from people. So most people aren't actually stuck in like they don't know what to do, but it's more so they get stuck in the logical brain and they're not implementing it. Like I'm thinking of one of my clients right now and supporting them through, okay, what's actually going on in their mind and why they're not implementing it. So I have been there. It's like someone gives you feedback and you're like, cool, but now how do I actually execute this strategically? So I just want to share. take a quick moment to share a little bit about the Story Alchemy Mastermind, which Andrea was in a year ago, which was phenomenal. This is for women in personal development, spiritual growth, health, wellness space for creatives, mystics, and ambitious business owners. And tangibly speaking, what we're working through in this mastermind are 3 types of stories. There's the soulful stories. Those are the ones that create emotional impact for like maybe a signature talk, presentation, something inspirational where we want to build connection. They're usually more personal stories. I call them soulful stories because they awaken our soul, or they awaken someone's soul. We have the activating type stories. So these are specific stories that move people or shift perspectives or beliefs. So really taking, where was it? This section, the belief in themselves, I have an entire framework and methodology of how to actually break that down in your content, because I know that's one of the places people get the most stuck on, because they don't know what their ideal client is actually thinking or believing on a subconscious level. And these posts, like, have you ever read, it doesn't have to be a post, it could be a book or even in a movie, and it's like something just completely shifted the way you, like, it opened your mind to a new possibility. Like, these are the most, in my opinion, powerful sales stories, because you're not actually selling the product or the service, but you're selling them a new way of thinking. So those stories, super powerful. And then sales stories, which are literally invitations into your work, conversion copy, selling out your offers, and the actual tangible. So we already have, the mastermind is already half full. I'm keeping it very small because I am someone who's in depth and likes to work in the nitty-gritty details with you. So I only have 2, maybe 3 spaces left. We are starting in December, and we're going we're gonna have a 2-week break at the holidays, but we'll start December 10th, December 17th, January 7th, 14th, and then I think there's a 5th call at the end of January. And then you also have access to Story Codes, which is my digital story program, which is, I'm gonna talk more about that in a sec, but it has everything from the inner journey of understanding your own life experiences, your own purpose, your own journey, to strategic messaging. It's all in there. And the cool thing about Story Codes is that when you join the mastermind, you get access to the program as just a bonus, but there also was a live call for Story Codes in December and January as well. So you get extra calls, extra support. The investment is $777 USD, or 2 payments of $410, or I am just offering this on the masterclass, an extended payment plan. It's ridiculous, of 3 payments of $295. So really, you have nothing to lose, and it's tax write-off season. So jump in. And here's the vision, because it's not just about being a better communicator and increasing your sales. Obviously, the end goal is to build your business, to build your vision, but it's about you becoming a recognized voice, not just another service provider, but someone who's leading a movement, not just another salesperson, but someone who's known and trusted. And you get to become the message, not just the messenger. And so it's more about, who do you get to become as a result of making more money in your business, creating more impact. And this response could be so individual to whoever is listening, because everyone's gonna have a different vision for their life and their business. But it's less about, obviously I've shared all the tangibles and benefits, but I really want you guys to see what is the bigger vision of, when you become a stronger storyteller, how does that build your impact and income? And then the last thing, just in case, if the mastermind is not on your radar right now and you just want to do the digital program, you totally can jump into that. There's a little holiday sale on, so you can get in for $222 USD, and there's literally 13 different modules, and we have a live call either December 22nd or the beginning of January. So just throwing that out there. Okay, any questions about that before I move to my Paris real estate story? This is a perfect segue because it was actually in buying my Paris apartment that I realized there's two different ways of selling. There's people that focus on the benefits and the features, and there's people who paint a picture of who you become. And there was one apartment in particular that I had visited, and I'm not saying women are better sales people, but I actually think that women tend to actually be stronger in sales, despite what we've been taught. Is I walked into the apartment and she literally was like so welcoming. It was like, sit on the couch and imagine your day here. Imagine waking up in the morning. And I was like, what? I've never had someone sell all the apartments I visited before were like, here's the kitchen, here's the bedroom, like features, great. I have eyes, I can see what is there. But this woman like was like, imagine who you would be living in this apartment. And it just blew my mind. Like I loved the apartment, but I was like, she is such a good salesperson. And so it really was the catalyst where I was like, I need to do a masterclass on story selling because more women need to know that when you speak to the identity shift, you make your sales so much easier, especially for women who are naturally, we're a little bit more skeptical, I think. We're a little bit less trusting when it comes to investing in ourselves. So people don't buy your service, they buy the version of themselves that exists within the story that you're telling. They're looking at the bigger vision. People aren't motivated by features or benefits or even your signature method. They want the transformation it represents. Just like a fitness program isn't about the set of reps, it's about the story of becoming strong or healthy. Or a business coach isn't selling hourly calls, but they're selling the story of a thriving entrepreneur. So to connect to people, this is where the neural mirrors come back into play. We need to tell a story that they see themselves in and that addresses those three beliefs that we've been talking about. So why identity shift stories work so well is people literally buy future identity. What was this post I wrote? It's not about your audience doesn't buy your service, they buy the version of themselves they see within your story. Controversial post alert, marketers don't come at me. Unfortunately, most entrepreneurs are telling stories like this: problem, solution. I was struggling, then I found this method, now life is better. But the thing is, people don't buy your service, they buy the version of themselves they see within your story. Because an identity shift story doesn't just show what you did, it shows who you became. So it's not about I was broke and then I signed a client, because that's problem solution, but it's about I was terrified and silencing myself, and then I became the woman who was the self-appointed leader of her life, showed up every day, decided I was worthy of being paid, and voila. See how that is like a micro story of that inner transformation? Because saying I was broke and then signed a client does not actually paint a picture of what was their internal belief system, what was their internal resistance. It's just, and so many of like the bro marketing out there is just like problem solution. But it's like it's missing the heart of the story and the journey, especially in this transformational type of work, where it's not always this straight path, that it's not linear. It's always going to be like this, especially when we're working with clients. It's like they progress and they go back. They progress and they move back. It's a natural part of the process. The second reason why these stories work so well is the embodiment, because it builds connection and trust around believing the same things, having similar values, being the proof, the evidence of the transformation you're selling. And then the third reason is it's proof of possibility. So a straight pitch of like, buy my thing, triggers resistance in people. Like when we feel like we're being sold to, we naturally feel defensive. Oh, I don't need that. Oh, I don't have that problem, right? So stories allow us to share something meaningful while doing the psychological belief shift. I don't want to say sneakily, but just like subconsciously, naturally. And I really think that that is the key to sales, that people don't either understand enough or they don't implement it enough in their marketing. So whenever I share identity shift stories, I get all types of reactions like, I needed to hear that so badly. I needed to read your post this morning. This is such a powerful reflection, blah, blah, blah. Like I always get this type of feedback when I share these types of stories. And the thing is that people will remember, they might not remember the details, but they'll remember how they felt reading the story. So pre-work, 3 questions to answer is, what do you sell, teach, or advocate for? Find 1 micro example of where you learn to embody that. What did you believe prior, and what was the new belief? I'm going to walk you guys through the framework, but this is just like when you answer these 3 questions. Now, here's where I know, because my private clients will get stuck on this and they'll be like, I don't know which example. Doesn't matter. Just pick one. Pick anything, because this isn't a one-hit wonder. It's not about perfection. Every day we're having multiple inner aha moments. Just pick one thing that you're like, I really want people to know this one thing. And then find an example of how you embody that or where you overcame that. And then just look at, what did you believe and what do you believe now? And here is the framework. So here's the cool thing about this. I'm going to give you this framework. I'm going to share an example. And then whether you love or hate ChatGPT, nowadays we don't have an excuse because you can literally brain dump your story into ChatGPT. You can plug and play this template and it will organize your story for you. I have severe ADHD, so my thoughts are often scrambled. Even though I write my own posts, I use ChatGPT to help me structure. So just wanted to share that. So in the identity shift story, you open with a powerful moment, something that's jarring or emotional, like you can go back to a memory. And then step 2, you set the scene. So where were you in life? What was your energy? What was your business? What was going on? What was at stake? Step 3, share the breaking point. So it's almost like when you're watching a movie, right? There's the status quo, you're watching the characters' lives, boom, something happens. What was the thing that happened that could have broken you? Again, thinking in the context of that one micro, that one shift that you've had in your own life. Then you have step 4, which is the moment of power. So what decision did you make that changed everything? This is so key. Again, it's like that belief. Step 5, this is the identity shift. So how did you start moving like your future self? Step 6, let me rewind. Step 5, how did you start moving like your future self? Literally, this is where the tangibles come into play. How did you start making new decisions? How did you perceive life differently? How did you then start noticing the changes in your life? Again, whether it's in business, health, relationships, any industry, any aspect of life. And then 6 is the transformation and the ripple effect. What happened next? As a result of this shift, what results have you experienced? And then number 7, and this is more big vision, but it's bringing it back to your brand promise and like the bigger vision of the movement. So I know in classes when I see something like this, my brain is like, goodbye. I don't know how to apply this. So that's why I'm going to share with you guys an example of how I actually did this. And full transparency, I wrote this post first, and then I reverse engineered how I did it, which is how I tend to do most things as a projector. My mind works with examples, and then after I'm able to conceptualize them. So this is on my Instagram. It's pinned at the top. Post, it was like a carousel. So my partner went to work one day and never came home. I wasn't just in a state of unimaginable grief. I also realized I couldn't afford my Paris rent that month. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so we have the stake emotionally, what's going on, and a little bit of drama because I'm going back to a memory. And actually, I was in this apartment. It was literally sitting right here when I was like, I can't pay my rent. This is back in 2018. Next slide. I was living in France on an entrepreneur visa that didn't allow me to get a job. My business wasn't making enough. My savings were gone, and I had no idea I was going to pay rent. That is step 2. Set the scene, breaking point, right? Like, okay, something's gotta something's got to change here. 3, my greatest fear of becoming homeless loomed over me. I remember calling my sister and saying, if I can't make my rent this month, can you help me out? I felt so ashamed. I was failing at business and life. I use this cute little photo of me as a kid. That's like, I had a lot of childhood trauma in my life, and so I legitimately do have that fear of becoming homeless, which is why this was so triggering to me. Slide number 4, the only way through. Okay, so now we're leading into the breakthrough. What was the moment of power? The only way through was to show up and sell my offers every day, which, side bracket, back in 2018, that was a problem for me because I had visibility fears. I didn't feel worthy. I had every freaking block under the sun. So to just show up and sell my offers was the biggest resistance, but I didn't have a choice. It was like do or die. Not to sound dramatic, but it literally was that dramatic. Slide number 4. Here's a micro story within the story. I remember signing a client for $250 for a month-long mentorship. I spent more time in the DMs addressing her fears and objections than we actually spent working together. But I needed that $250 to pay my rent. Slide number, I think this is slide 6. And this slide like breaks my heart because 6 years ago, it still has 2 views. No one saw this video. Anyways, I started showing up even when I felt like no one was listening. I posted every day, sometimes multiple times a day, holding myself through the fear, through the silence and the doubts. Slide number 7, I move into a bit more context. For years, I had stayed small. This was actually the underlying issue. This is why the symptom was the visibility fear, but the underlying root was actually the childhood trauma. So for years, I had stayed small, obeying the bullies and abusers in my life by keeping myself quiet, chained to their rules, even in their absence. But that season in Paris changed me. I stopped waiting to be chosen, and I appointed myself as the leader and the woman whose voice mattered and who could build a business and life on her own terms. There's a huge gap in the story here, and I'll address this after, because then I skip to, well, then my income doubled after that year. I healed my wounds. I traveled the world as a cinematic videographer, storyteller. I've mentored hundreds of women building simple, soul-aligned businesses by leveraging the power of their story. This is this step here, the identity shift, like who I had to become. This is the transformation, the ripple effect of what happened. The reason why I don't bridge in this particular story of step-by-step what I actually did is just because it's not relevant to the actual story. The point of the story is to share who I had to become. There's other posts where I could break down what I actually did to build my business to 6 figures. The next slide, here's the most beautiful part, is that back then I sold because I was desperate to survive, and now I get to sell from a place of joy. True fulfillment. The true fulfillment I feel in mentoring women has become the heart of my business. So here I'm bringing it back to my why this matters to me, because success without, who says this? Success without fulfillment is the greatest failure. I think it was Tony Robbins. Today I help women build legacy brands through story, soul, and strategy, bridging the practical with the mystical, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's kind of like this little at the end where it's like, if my partner had never walked out on me in 2018, I may have continued to play small and under-earn. Paris is a city where I skyrocketed into my highest potential, starting from survival of just paying bills to now having a 6+ figure business and assets, and soon buying my first apartment. Need to add, in the process of buying a Paris apartment. So that was a lot, but do you all see how I followed this structure and told the story? And I mean this so transparently. I literally brain dumped into ChatGPT and was like, help me with my method, put this into an order. Obviously, then these are my words and I go back and tweak it and everything. Oh yeah, this is the question. What about the gap in your story of the how? The type of identity story is more about the inner journey than the actual step-by-step. You can sprinkle this into your overall marketing and messaging. It's just, it takes people, once we go into the how, it takes people out of that imagination and possibility, and then they start to go into the analytical brain, and that's not the purpose of this type of story. Yeah, here it is. I was like, your brain is magnificent, but use ChatGPT. Like set it up, tell ChatGPT, you guys can literally do this, drop the framework, riff on your story, and it's gonna spew it out for you. That's why I'm like, we don't have excuses today. We are all very smart, but ChatGPT is smarter. So we cannot use writer's block as an excuse. So the next steps are I want you to implement one of the prompts from today so you get that instant value. So one of the prompts on, where is it? Going back to one of these prompts here. So either the identity story, a solution-based story, or your client's limiting belief type story, and implement it and see how that plays out, see how people resonate. It might not even be a post. It could be like in a conversation with a potential client. It could be in a presentation. Doesn't matter where it shows up. The second step is to join the Story Alchemy Mastermind, which we have 3 spots left. We kick off December 10th. Or if that's not within your scope of investment right now, then you can join the Story Code Signature Program. And we do have a live call, so you will get that one-to-one feedback. And I tend to keep those calls. I tend to work with smaller groups of people, but have more depth. So all that being said, we stayed to an hour. This is incredible.